Welcome to chapter 31 of the book of Ezekiel, parable of the trees. In this chapter, I see basically the subject is Pharaoh, king of Egypt, as we'll see. The only other tree that it would probably be in there would be Assyria. And it starts off, and it came to pass in the 11th year, in the tri, comes from that third, the third mini, day one of the month. The word of the Lord came to me, saying, E anthropu, as it always does, says this in this way, say to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and to his multitude. Now, there's no time frame, so it could be right coming up to the time that Ezekiel is writing, or it could be out in the future, as these other chapters have shown to be a possibility. His multitude, I guess it would just be the armies that he would have. Now, it's probably relating here to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and then it goes into whom did you liken yourself in your haughtiness? So this Pharaoh at the time was probably Necho, that he's talking about, Pharaoh Necho. And it says, behold, Assur was a cypress in Lebanon. Now he brings in this Assyria. That was the kingdom that was from the northern part of Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and the Euphrates River, I guess up where the Kurds would be today, in Kurdistan and Iraq. And it went all the way across into Asia Minor, into what would be Turkey today, and came down into Israel, and they took the country of Israel captive, but the country of Judah was not taken captive. But so Assyria was a cypress in Lebanon. So Sennacherib, the king of Assyria that was up in Lebanon, when he came down into Israel, and so that's probably what he's talking about. And he's goodly, it was goodly in shoots, and dense in the protection, and high in size. And his top came unto the midst of the clouds. So now we get a problem here because these goes from the masculine him, and we have two possibilities. Pharaoh, king of Egypt, is a he. Actually, we have three. It would be Ezekiel, but we know he's not talking about Ezekiel down here. And then we have Assyria, his top, so that's masculine for Assyria. Then water nourished him. Now, is this him, Assyria, or is this Egypt? I could be, behold, Assyria was a cypress in Lebanon, goodly in shoots, and dense in the protection, and high in size. And then it could be where it could be a period. You could start and say, and his top came into the midst of the clouds, and it could be talking about Pharaoh Necho here, because it says water nourished him, the deep made him rise up. And this is water has to do with more with Pharaoh Necho and the Nile and so forth than it would with Assyria, although it could be. I'm not sure here. I'm just bringing up these possibilities. Either we have the derivative hydro, comes from that, either, hydro. Water nourished him. And the avisos, the abyss, has to do with the abyss was mentioned early in Genesis, where the abyss, where the spirit hovered over the abyss, or darkness was above the abyss, the deep, and it generally has something to do with water. Water nourished him. The deep made him rise up. Now it turns into the feminine. She led the rivers round about his plants. Now, who is the she? Okay, the pronoun before, not the pronoun, the feminine before, which would agree with it, would be the deep. E, avisos. E is a feminine article. So the deep made him rise up. The deep led the rivers round about his plants. And sent forth her, the deep, her collections, the deep's collection of water, unto all the trees of the field. Now, I think he's talking about Pharaoh Necho here, not the king of Assyria. Because of this, his greatness was raised up high over all the trees of the field. Xyla, xylophone comes from that, the xyla, xyla tree, a wooden instrument, musical instrument, which you hit these little wooden bars. And his tender branches were multiplied, and his shoots were raised up high over much water, and his stretching out. Now, I believe it's Pharaoh because the subject at the beginning was Pharaoh. So I can't imagine all this not being about Pharaoh and just being about Assyria, but the break is not so very succinct. In his shoots nested all the birds of the heaven. So now, what's he talking about, the birds of the heaven? Is he talking about different nations underneath the power of Pharaoh Necho? Probably that's what I would guess is talking about. I don't think it's just really talking about birds. And underneath his tender branches, Egypt, all the wild beasts of the plain procreated. In his shadow dwelt all the multitude of nations. So there it is, the nations. And they built themselves all up with Pharaoh and Egypt, including Judah. And he became good in his height because of the multitude of his tender branches. So Egypt became strong, Pharaoh, for his roots existed among much water. And for a long time, Egypt was a power in that area for 1,000 years or more, a couple thousand years, one of the oldest civilization. And such cypresses in the paradise of God, and the pines were not likened to his shoots. Now it's interesting because now where did Pharaoh? How is he? Why is it sort of changing here? It's talking about the cypresses in the paradise of God, and the pines were not likened to his shoots. To me, there's a slight change here because it gets into well, you'll see here where it says, and fir trees became not likened to his branches. Well, now Egypt is not known for all these trees, so it's talking about here such cypresses in the paradise of God, and pines were not likened to his shoots, and that's shoot is just a small rooted part of the plant. So nothing was like him. He was great. Egypt, as we know in history, was one of the most powerful countries for thousands of years. And every tree in the paradise of God, and we have paradiso is a transliteration into paradise in English. Every tree in the paradise of God was not likened to him in his beauty. So again, the paradise and relating it to him. And earlier we saw where the serpent, Tyre, the king of Tyre, related to the beast and so forth, and the paradise. And now here we have this change, and so it could be talking about in the future with the beast. That's the possibility. And because of the multitude of his tender branches, I made him good in the multitude of his tender branches. Well, that's a strange structure. Because of the multitude of his tender branches, I made him good in the multitude of his tender branches. Now, what is he talking about here? Now, he could be talking about, again, Pharaoh Necho, or he could be talking about the strengthening of the beast. And the trees of the paradise of the delicacy of God were jealous of him. Well, I don't see the trees of the paradise, how it relates to Pharaoh Necho, but I see here now it sounds like more, it could be relating to the future beast. The power that he's going to be taken over, and the basically the trees of the paradise could possibly be Israel, the nations. They're jealous of him. On account of this, thus says Adonai Kyrios, because you became great to greatness. Now, again, it could be still Pharaoh, as I said, or we'll have to see, I guess, and whoever's at the time in the future with the beast, if this relates to it. Because you became great to greatness, and you put your top into the midst of the clouds, and his heart was lifted up into the height. So the Pharaoh, even I delivered him up into the hands of the ruler of the nations. Now, probably Nebuchadnezzar, and if it's a future, I don't know, we could be talking about Christ, and he caused his destruction. Strangers utterly destroyed him, pestilent ones from the nations, and they threw him down upon the mountains. Now, I don't know where Necho was thrown down on any mountains by the nations. So there's another one that's just like, wow, hard for me to take this whole chapter in and try to decide what is what. And I'm trying the best I can here, but in all the ravines, his tender branches fell. So all the ravines, places all over the world, maybe. I don't know how that would relate to Necho either. And his trunks were broken in every plain of the land, and all the peoples of the nations went down from his protection, and they dashed him. So either Pharaoh Necho or the future beast that was all the nations, that they dashed him. They got rid of him. Or it could be Pharaoh Necho that was in the Nebuchadnezzar and the countries coming against him. All the birds of the heaven rested upon his downfall, the birds being the nations, and upon his trunks existed all the wild upon his trunks existed all the wild beasts of the field. So now here we got the wild beasts in the book of Revelation with the beast we're talking about. So again, this is where that accentuates that part of the beast being over Necho, so that all the trees by the water should not be exalted in their greatness, and put not their top into the midst of the clouds. All the ones drinking water stand not in their height against him. All were given unto death, even the depth of the earth, in the midst of the sons of men going down into the pit. Well, the pit, this is where Satan goes, to the bottomless pit. And thus says Adonai Kyrios. Now, here there could be a change. In which day he went down into Hades. Now, who went down into Hades? Necho or the beast? Well, we know the beast did. So, and it says the abyss mourned him. And he goes into the abyss until he's released after the 1,000 years, and he comes back. That is the beast, not Pharaoh Necho. And I attended to her rivers. Now that would be the abyss here, would be the last feminine. I attended to the rivers of the abyss and restrained the abundance of water, of which the abyss has. And Lebanon was darkened over him. Now, I don't know how Lebanon related to Pharaoh Necho, although Pharaoh Necho did go up into Lebanon and up to Hamath, so maybe that's what it's referring to. And he was defeated by Nebuchadnezzar. So all of Lebanon was darkened over him. It could be relating to that. And all the trees of the plains were enfeebled by him, his allies, possibly. From the sound of his downfall, the nations shook when I brought him down into Hades. Again, this Hades, and there we go back to the beast, more towards that, with the ones going down into the pit. And we know those would be the false, the people who are that are going along with the beast will be put into the pit. They follow him with the false prophet and the beast, and Satan. And all the trees of the delicacy comforted him in the lowermost earth, and the chosen ones and the best ones of Lebanon, all the ones drinking water. Well, there you go again. It's this could be at that time. I don't know. For also even they went down with him into Hades, with the one slain by the sword, and his seed, dwelling under his protection, were destroyed in the middle of their life. Well, there we go. It's really hard to decide which it's talking about. To whom are you likened in power and in glory and in greatness among the trees of the delicacy? Go down with the trees of the delicacy into the depth of the earth. You shall sleep in the midst of uncircumcised, with one slain by the sword. And then it ends with this, thus Pharaoh and all the multitude of his strength, says Adonai the Lord. So that whole chapter could be just about Pharaoh, nothing to do with the beast in the future, or it could be. I don't know. Did the best I can on the chapter. It's hard for me to determine what exactly it's referring to here and who is who. And I don't know if it's going to get any better in chapter 32, a lamentation against Pharaoh and Egypt. And we'll go through that, chapter 32, and I hope you'll join us in chapter 32. And God bless.